So I think we'll make a start. A very, very good morning to everybody. My name is Andy McBain. I'm on the BCO Scotland Chapter Committee, and I'm delighted to be hosting today. I'm joined, before we get that, today is one of a series of events hosted by the BCO in Scotland around turbocharged trends. So, as I said, my name is Andy McBain. I head up the Office Design and Choice team at NatWest, Royal Bank of Scotland. I'm delighted that I'm joined today by three experts from three different sectors of the property industry, and I'm going to ask Angela Lowe from CBRE, Ross Hunter from Graven, and Peter Kearns from the Scottish Futures Trust to introduce themselves. Angela, just wondering if you could go first, please.
Hi everyone, good morning. So day to day, I advise occupiers on how real estate can be used to help them achieve their corporate goals with a particular focus on acquisitions and disposals. I also advise landlords on building design and leasing. So given that we've seen take up across the UK be about 65% down on average, I'm really interested in all these changes that are happening in our market and what that might mean for the office moving forward.
Thanks, Angela. Ross?
Good morning. I'm Ross Hunter. I'm one of the founders and directors of Graven. I'm an architect, and most of our work is concerned with the insides of buildings. And typically that means that we're working on offices and hotels, but quite a few other things in between. We're very engaged in brand. We have a brand team within the business, and increasingly, I guess we're involved in more strategic design-led thinking as well to support our work.
Thanks, Ross. And last but not least, Peter. So Peter might have some issues. Peter, yeah, Peter's there. We can't see him, but we can see him if you know what I mean. Peter, you might need to go out and come back in again. Anyway, right, let's just crack on. Okay, so thanks for the introductions. For the last 9 months or so, as we all know, there has been an explosion of home working and blended working between the office and the home, not just in the UK, but actually all around Europe, all around the world. Every single kind of industry and sector that uses the office, doesn't matter where you've been, whether it's America, Brazil, Peru, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Scotland, Glasgow, Edinburgh, everybody has been impacted. So the amazing positive news that we've heard in the last couple of weeks about 3 vaccines now, and as they gain regulatory control, they're going to launch, we're going to get mass rollouts, and 2021 is now looking a lot more positive than maybe it was a month ago. So the short-term future over the next 6 months is probably a little bit unclear, but it's widely recognised that the longer-term impact of COVID will require a shift in both employers' and employees' views and the purpose of the office. I'm just going to stop there. So Peter's joined us. Peter, we were just doing some introductions there, and myself and Ross and Angela have all stepped in and just given ourselves a quick introduction. So I just wondered, Peter, if you could do that now, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, just as I managed to connect, I had to go back out and come back in again. So yes, Peter Kearns from Scottish Futures Trust. I'm a Senior Associate Director there. I look after the local civil estate, so that would be all of the local authorities, the NHS, emergency services. So I look at all the property portfolios in relation to all of the public services in those areas. And as we all would expect, smarter working and the new frontiers for smarter working is hugely relevant to everybody across both the public and private sector. And it's something we've been working on with a number of organizations, including Andy. And indeed, we had a forum on that yesterday. So very topical at the moment.
Great, thanks, Peter. So let's get into the business of the day. We've got 4 questions that we're going to be posing to the panel, and we also want to open this out to everyone on the panel. So if you've got Q&A, you can use the Q&A button. So let's have I'm very, very keen that we have a conversation around this. So let's see how it goes. So the 4 questions we've got is, will offices fulfill a different, more social role in the future? How can offices be created to attract the best talent? What will new business models look like for occupiers and the broader corporate real estate industry? And the last one, is this the death of presenteeism? So let's hit the first one. Will offices fulfill a different, more social role? And I'm wondering, Angela, if you could give a viewpoint of what you're seeing from a yourself CBRE point of view.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, given everything that's happening, we are seeing that in the future people will come to the offices less, and in the clients we are talking to, nobody's thinking it's going to be 100% home working. Nobody's thinking it's going to be 100% back in the office. So the working model is going to be different. So the office is going to have to be different moving forward. And I think, you know, firstly, social interaction is going to be a really important function of the office in the new world that we're moving into. I quite liked a quote from the chief executive of Google, who had said that we firmly believe that being in person, being together, having a sense of community is super important when you have to solve hard problems and create something new. So using the office for community and social interaction. I think, you know, it's not just that though, and it'll move into collaboration. So again, our clients are looking at how they can reduce the assigned seating in their workplaces, increase the collaboration space, and increase the social settings that they're offering. And the general feedback that people want to be in the office at the same time as their other team members. Therefore, you know, the challenges that potentially brings and how you manage this sort of peak working times that people all want to be in together. So social collaboration. I think the reflection of the brand and culture as well is going to, how that is going to work. Again, had a client comment, you know, when they've been onboarding people who've come from different companies, it being challenging when they're not sort of entrenched in the office environment. They're sort of bringing their old culture with them and maybe not buying into the new culture. So how is the office in the future going to really reflect that brand? And then I think finally, it's all about the talent and, you know, how they engage with talent and educate them moving forward. And that will be the place, the office will be the place that will happen. So yeah, certainly that I would say that's the key trends. And then on the ground, you know, decision making is definitely being delayed. I would say about half our clients are still at that strategy setting phase, which is delaying decisions and what they're going to do. But there's definitely a move, because there's uncertainty about what the office is going to look like, this desire for flexibility. So whether that be, I think I've had 3 clients over the last couple of weeks ask, is the landlord going to be providing meeting spaces and collaboration spaces within their buildings? Also, you might have seen the news last week about WeWork and Deloitte's in Manchester. You know, it's quite unusual for a Big 4 firm to take a big chunk of WeWork as opposed to something traditional. So this flexible model becoming even more important.
Great stuff, Angela. And just a reminder, don't be shy in asking any questions on the Q&A tab. So we'd love to hear from anybody. And if anyone's got a view from their occupiers or from their clients, or if you are an occupier and you're occupying space, it would be brilliant to hear everyone's conversation on this. So Ross, I'm just wondering if what you're seeing from an architectural design point of view.
Yeah, just to pick up on something Angela said there, I think that knowledge sharing is, and that encompasses education and training and learning and cultural symbiosis, I suppose, is as much a social activity as anything else. So I think that's a really interesting perspective. It's not just about having a coffee, it's about how you relate to people. And I've often said that we learned the most valuable lessons about office design from the bars and clubs and coffee shops we designed in the 1990s, where we really had to think about how people interact with each other. And I think understanding how people communicate with each other in architectural space is really vital in designing spaces for people. We talk a lot about stage sets, about designing stage sets for the everyday dramas of normal life, you know, the props and backdrops that that brings some kind of excitement and perhaps some purpose and meaning to what is at the end of the day quite ordinary. That's what we mostly do, I think, as designers. I mean, you know, if you didn't meet your partner at school or university, then it's quite likely that you met them at work. And if you didn't, then it was in one of those bars or coffee shops, you know. So I think in balance, I think that offices will be more focused on socialization, but it's not to say that they don't have to perform in other ways as well. You know, it's not all about chatting and having a coffee. It's about solo concentrated work. It's about specialized tasks. It's about how you access the kind of big and expensive things that you can't have in your house. And we can't do everything over the phone. So the answer is broadly yes, of course, it will be the case, but it's not the be all and end all of successful office design.
Thanks, Ross. Heading across to Peter to give, because you know, the public, there is the public sector, there's the private sector. I'm just wondering if you're seeing the same trends across the local authority groups that we've got across Scotland.
Yeah, we are. From the point of view that, as you know, we've carried out, in conjunction with both the public and the private sector and voluntary sector, a series of surveys surveying some close on 16,000 people. And across all those sectors, they're all saying the same thing in terms of what's coming back. So the stats that have come back from all those surveys are saying 88% of people want to continue to working from home in some shape or form. And as Angela was saying, indeed Ross was saying, that it's not that it's the death of the office. It's not. The office will still be part of the picture going forward. So whilst, you know, another stat is 64% of people are saying they want to work from home maybe a bit more, but to have that flexibility to be able to go out and meet in other locations, some closer to home. So not always working from home, but maybe closer to home. And that the office would be used for socialization, collaboration, integration, and innovation. And they would be the purposes you would come back to the office. And that could be as flexible as it needs to be in terms of how many days a week you need to do that. But you would do that probably more by agreement with your colleagues and teams as to who would come to the office and why. So the distributed model of working and that flexibility is to give people choice. And we're seeing that in both the public and the private sector. It's not confined to one sector, it's across all sectors. So very much to do with that flexibility of where you can work from in any given day.
Thanks very much. I'll just chip in from a NatWest Royal Bank of Scotland point of view. So, and maybe from an industry point of view across the finance banking industry. So what we're finding is we have different types of employee. So we might have customer contact people, we might have operational people who do a lot of processing. We've got folk in branches, we've got corporate banking, relationship managers. So there is a vast array of different roles that employers employ, and it's not a one size fits all. So one of the things I think a lot of occupiers are doing, and Angela hinted on it, is there's a lot of strategic thinking going on, is what is right for those different roles. It's definitely not a one size fits all. And some folk, as we look at the new starters, the folk coming out of universities, the folk coming into jobs in the first place, where they're trying to network and build up that social circle of people at work, how do they do that? Or how might they do that if they're working from home a lot more than has traditionally been the case? So there is a huge amount of strategic thinking across lots of different types of industry that occupy the office. I don't know if anyone's, Angela or Ross, Peter, if you've got any kind of views on that as well, if you're seeing that from clients.
Yeah, I just to jump in, I think that in our organisation, our small organisation, I mean, there's just a little more than 20 people here. What we've found when we've had those same conversations with our team is that the people who want to be here most, the people who want to be in the studio most, are younger members of staff and the people who've been here for less time, and they're still on that learning curve. They're still figuring out what it is to work here and how we work. And the ones I think that, and those are the guys that have suffered most, if I'm honest, over the last 9 months, and that they've not been able to sit beside the guy that's really good at that piece of software that they're trying to get on top of, or the person that doesn't quite, or been able to sit beside the person that fills the gap in their own knowledge. And it's really hard to do that remotely. If anybody who typically works in a kind of studio environment, I'm sure would agree, it's really hard to get the immediacy of a relationship across Teams or Zoom or the phone or email, which is basically what we were left with.
I think it's when you look at some of the statistics about, I think it was in London, over 35% of under 35s live in shared accommodation. So it's getting back to there's definitely, I think, a difference between some younger members of the team, as you say, and other people who have a different home setup, and it's maybe more amenable to working at home more time during the week.
I also think that not everybody wants autonomy. I think it might be a slightly controversial thing to say, but some people actually really enjoy the structure of a more structured existence. Not everybody wants to be able to find their own way through their own problems. The support of structure can be really comforting, I think, in a lot of circumstances.
So thanks both. Right, we've got a couple of questions, which is brilliant. So thanks to Roddy McLean and Tom Loback for their questions. I'll start with Roddy's first. Is most people accept that when we return to the office in larger numbers, more collaboration space will be the biggest change we see. What other kinds of work settings do you think will be essential for most organizations? So Peter, I know there's been a lot of research in the public sector. I'm wondering if you've got any views on that.
Yeah, well, from what Roddy is saying there, that is definitely the case, that to use your phrase yesterday, Andy, the desk is dead. So I think offices will see a large reduction in rows of desks and workstations, and the offices being converted more to collaboration spaces, whereby teams can have that more, how would you say, collaborative interaction with one another, as I was mentioning earlier. So I think the office will change to have those types of spaces, more meeting spaces, more functional spaces, rather than rows and rows of desks. I don't think desks will completely disappear. I think there might be some space allocation for some of those, so people can maybe more touch down than rather sit there 9 to 5. But definitely the office and the environment and look and feel of it will definitely change. And that seems to be what is coming through from right across the spectrum.
Ross, I don't know if at the sharp end of design, I don't know if you're getting any clarity on that.
In a way, those are the interesting spaces to design, but also I think we'll see more focused space. And one of the challenges of working from home is that it's sometimes difficult to get that absolute focus, absolute silence, and a do not disturb sign without the dog barking or the kids running in or whatever it might be. So I think if you've got something really vital that you've got to do for a deadline, it's great to be able to go somewhere where you know that you're going to have all the support that you need. There's a coffee machine, there's proper broadband, there's proper technology, and you can lock yourself in a quiet room and get on with it. So I think that's an important part as well. And yeah, it's the balance to the collaborative space. I think office space will become more specialized in the tasks that it offers across the board, I think.
And I would agree with that, Ross. I think you're quite correct there in that it's giving people the choice of where they want to work from and choosing what particular activity they need to do in any given day from whatever location suits them best on that day, whether that's home, whether that's the office, or as you say, a coffee shop, or indeed meeting other colleagues in partner organizations in other locations. So it is about that idea of choice. and that idea on the model of flexibility. And the office most definitely will have a role to play in it going forward.
Great stuff. I'll maybe move to the next question from Tom Loback. So what role will technology play in a post-COVID world? And what role will tech play in achieving our carbon targets by 2030, 2050? Has the simple need for commercial survival pushed these targets into the long grass? Angela, I wonder if I could come to you on that one.
Yeah, so I think the use of smart building technology is inevitable for a variety of reasons, and whether it's user experience or sustainability, I think it all gets thrown into the mix, and it will be an essential part of office buildings moving forward, which will go towards achieving some of these ESG goals in the future. And we're definitely seeing, whether it's our occupier clients or our landlord clients who are all signing up to renewed targets. I think it was Landsec or just ended up saying they were going to be net zero by 2030. I need to double check the stats, but they're all bringing in their targets. So yeah, occupier clients, landlords, and CBRE as a business are all looking at how they're going to achieve these sustainability goals. So I think both go hand in hand.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm going to move on to another question, which is kind of linked, which came in from Richard Mitchell. How do you think the hybrid of Microsoft Teams and in the office meeting will work in practice? So I'm guessing what we're getting at there, Richard, is going forward, you can't guarantee everybody in your meeting is going to be in the room, and quite a few folk will be in the virtual room because there just might not be space or work-life balance or choice of everybody coming into the office as much as they used to. So in the previous world, you could almost guarantee if you were holding a meeting, lots of people would be in the meeting room and very, very few would be virtual. Going forward, it's likely to be much closer to a 50-50 split, and maybe in many, many occasions, there'll be more folk virtually than in the room. So is this worth investing in, as it is a likely long-term approach to flexible working? Peter, I don't know how that impacts, again, some of the thinking and thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree that definitely the virtual world that we've now found ourselves in has become more of a platform that people are more comfortable with using now going forward. So if anything, COVID-19 has accelerated and demonstrated that we can actually work from anywhere. Obviously, most of us have been working from home, and I think we've found very quickly that we've adapted to that. There might have been a few stumbling blocks at the beginning, but I think where we are now, nearly 8 months later, everyone seems to have gotten into the flow of that. So the virtual world in terms of meetings have been, in some respects, easier to coordinate than trying to get people to a specific location physically, whether that's the office or a partner's office or somewhere else, because of the travel aspect that's usually involved, the logistics of getting people from A to B. The virtual world has kind of eliminated an awful lot of those logistics and allowed people to meet even quicker. People seem to be more available virtually than they were in the physical world. I'm not saying that the physical world is now redundant, of course it's not, but I think what we're going to see is that meeting ability on a virtual platform we've now seen is actually easy to coordinate. So it most definitely will have a firm focus in the way we work going forward. And there will still be face-to-face meetings where you will meet in different locations. And you will probably have a mix in some locations where people will meet physically, but you'll also have people joining virtually as well. So I think that the virtual world is here to stay, and it's how we adapt and use it going forward. These things will always be an evolution as we roll along, but I think it's here to stay, and that seems to be what's coming back from across all the sectors.
Can I just quickly jump in that one? Andy, I think what Richard was getting at was that last point, that kind of mix of real and digital. And actually, I think it's a really interesting idea, because at the moment, we're still working in a, most of us I think are working in a very structured use of digital remote media, but I think the idea of I guess you might characterize it as, you know, a team table or a normal kind of work setting with a monitor at one end and the rest of the team on the monitor, effectively on Teams, and perhaps always on. You know, so it's not just about necessarily having a meeting when you think you need to or organize a meeting and have that meeting. It's the potential of turning to someone who's working remotely and say, do you know the answer to this question, and then carry on with what you're doing. You know, so that kind of mixture that is what you would normally have in a normal office environment. How does that work if you extend that in? And why wouldn't you have technology which is essentially always on within the office, within the HQ environment, so people can duck in and out of that virtually? I think it's an interesting idea, and time will probably tell whether it gets traction.
Sorry, my doorbell went just at the wrong time there. So apologies for the dogs barking and you go on mute and then you forget you're on mute. So one last question, which is from Fiona Williamson. What are your thoughts on private space to allow virtual and private calls to be completed from the office space? So I'll maybe just answer that relatively quickly if I can, or a view on it is that I think the office furniture designers are on the journey. I think there's going to be a lot of new designs for small pods, small private work settings, etc., coming from furniture manufacturers and furniture designers. And I think also in the space planning of spaces is how do you create that quiet corner where you can disappear, and you know that if you're in that quiet corner, that's a kind of semi-private space, etc. So I think there's a crossover there between really, really clever space planning, understanding your building and understanding the floor and where you can maybe get those quiet corners. And also, I do believe that the furniture manufacturers are responding to the change in the market. They need to. And what we're seeing, certainly from a NatWest point of view, is we're seeing a lot of change in responding to these little niches of private calls, private spaces, project team setups, etc., which are going to come in as we look forward to different types of work settings and different types of design. I'm going to move on to another question. So I'm going to jump the question, and this one is, what will new business models look like for occupiers and the broader corporate real estate industry? And I'm maybe going to pick up on Hazel Pearson's question, which is linked to this, which says, with Angela's stats on office lettings down 60%, and the likely work styles in the future office being a mix of home and office, what do the panel think the impact will be on the net internal area demand from public and private sectors? Okay, so hopefully you all got that. So I'm going to jump to Peter, and let's start with public sector view.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think that will come down to the organization on an organizational basis. The office, in terms of a reduced footprint, some people are saying they probably will reduce their footprint. If I take our own office, which a bit like Ross, you know, we're a smaller organization. We've got 80 plus people, but the vast majority of us are flexible. And our office, which would have had, you know, an element of rows of desks, we can now see those disappearing, but we don't see our floor space reducing because we're going to convert it to having that more collaborative, interactive function in terms of what we will do on a daily basis. So I think it will be different for each organization. But I don't see huge reductions in floor space from across the public sector. I think what they will do is they will look to partner with other organizations and use their spaces more efficiently and have that collaborative internal for their own organization, but they will also use collaboration with partner bodies that they will share the buildings with. So I don't see the floor spaces necessarily dropping dramatically, but it may, in some instances, for some organizations. So we see the office being retained, but the function of it changing. And hopefully the floor area may stay the same, but it might reduce for some organizations depending on their needs.
Angela, are you got any views on it?
Yeah, I think the initial shift in the market has been for occupiers who are live with requirements, cutting down their space requirements, but that's been quite an immediate reaction. And that was organizations that probably had no remote working at all within their business. I think looking sort of longer term, the research that our teams have took some comfort. The fact that office densities had sort of increased so much over the last 15 years, you know, the view was or is that as we maybe occupy the office spaces less densely, that means we're not going to get this sort of headline grabbing 25–50% of the office space, you know, being reduced. So I think on balance, the research was showing a sort of marginal decrease of somewhere between 3 and 7%, but it's quite probably early to say those predictions are fact just now, but it was a sort of marginal decrease as opposed to a major shift that we've been seeing. So hopefully not too much demand, and it's just I think we're trying to also extract what's structural and what's just cyclical, you know, because our market does go in peaks and troughs anyway. So, and we're maybe not quite as badly affected in the regions, but if you look at London, you know, their market has always had more peaks and troughs compared to the regions. So what's cyclical and what's structural, and the jury's out on that just now.
Ross, are you seeing anything coming into yourselves? I suppose it might be linked to Angela's comment that it's the people who maybe have the lease breaks coming up who are looking at it slightly more urgently than those who have got longer lease breaks or freehold.
Who's that
to, Andy?
To Ross, sorry.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we're seeing it specifically within our client base at the minute, but that doesn't mean to say it's not happening. And I very much like the idea of the reduction of monolithic HQs in city centres. I think that what Peter said about fragmentation and collaboration is actually a very attractive and positive prospect, and I like the hypothesis, I suppose, that large organizations that are large monolithic organizations might find it beneficial to create intermediate spaces. So they may reduce the size of their core of their HQ, but actually be more generous to their people by creating intermediate spaces in other locations. So that kind of fragmentation, I think, could be very positive, and you know, almost by devolving and spreading the organization across a wider community, and it would be more sustainable in many respects, perhaps, as well.
I was quite jealous. We got the presentation in our new London building the other week, and they've got the whole floor dedicated to a new gym, a new spin studio, you know, classes happening at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I think I'm going to have to get myself moved to London to get the benefit of these multi-purpose offices.
Another question that's come in from Phil Reed. I'm just going to pick out one of the questions in a couple. He's got about 3 or 4 questions in there, but will some occupiers return to a similar operational style as before? So whilst we're talking about a lot of change here, there may be some occupiers who actually what they had before is going to fit perfectly well. So are we seeing some people just saying actually what we had before is pretty good, and this talk of change is nonsense? So again, Peter, I might come to you first on that.
Yeah, we're not seeing that coming forward from certainly across the public sector. Nobody's saying we want to revert back to what we had before. I think there's a recognition that things are going to change and have changed. And as Angela quite rightly said, we still have a ways to go in terms of what the future will eventually look like. And that will change and evolve over time. But I don't think certainly in the public sector, people are saying, yeah, we're just going to go back to what we had before. So no, I don't see the status quo being retained. change is coming. We're already seeing it. And I think any organization that thinks they can revert back to what it used to be potentially run the risk of losing and attracting talent going forward, and indeed retaining their talent. So I think an organization would need to think very carefully that if they were just to go back to what used to be, they might find themselves on the fringes.
I think
Thanks
the
for that.
employee sentiment's just not there anymore for returning to that sort of working. And
Agreed.
I think in the recent survey our guys did, I think it was only 3% could see themselves having no form of remote working at all, and that was 40% back about 3 years ago. So there's been a major shift in employee sentiment.
But I think Phil's question was, will some organisations carry on? And I think they will. I mean, we're working on a project just now, an office move for an organisation that employ about 30 people, and I mean, it's going to be a lot nicer than where they are at the moment. But the bones of the brief are essentially the same as they have at the moment. Individual offices for workers, one-to-one desk ratios. There will be added attractions that will make it much better space. But the consultation that we did with the staff right across the whole organisation, they weren't especially turned on by the idea of the flexibility that others might be grasping. So I think, Phil, there are still, and it might be a case of saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. There are organisations for whom change isn't a priority, and probably you're right, Peter. Probably they'll disappear in due course. But the speed of change, the inertia which exists within some organisations, will mean that some are very much slower to adopt change than others.
Good, thanks for that. There's quite a few questions coming in, and they're all talking about whether it's presenteeism or the challenge for people joining an organisation for the first time, or people coming into the world of work for the first time, and one of them hints that maybe for more senior managers, maybe it's a bit cozier for them than it is for folks starting out in life. So it might be just be worth touching on this. So if we've got, how do you create an office or a workplace where people who are starting off on the journey, joining your company for the first time, or starting off in their professional career or career anyway, how do you link them with the organisation that they're working for? We've got a recession coming along, or we're in a recession, and what you sometimes see during a recession is far more presenteeism, because people want to be seen to be busy, and therefore, so it's one of those human natures that you see. If a company is going through a lot of transformation, you generally see lots of people being very, very busy, because they don't want to be on the list of people getting the letter. It's one of those things that you see. So how do we support those people who are coming into a job for the first time, joining the organisation for the first time, and how do we make a build? What is there in there from a design point of view to link the new employee or even the existing employee with the purpose of the organisation that you work for, the culture of the organisation you work for, if you're only going to be coming into the office once a week, twice a week, or a couple of times a month? Okay, so quite a big question there, but presenteeism, young professionals, how do we get the balance right for everybody? I'll maybe come to yourself, Ross, for that.
I knew you were going to ask me that question. I think there's a couple of parts to that, and it's a complicated question. I think, in a way, the easy bit is presenteeism. I think that nothing about working remotely, in my opinion, will reduce the idea of presenteeism. It's just as easy to, people will still be sending emails at 3 o'clock in the morning to show her, and then be back on it at 7 again the next day. In a sense, I think we've probably all worked longer hours and with more awkward days and later and earlier and all the rest through the pandemic than we may have ever worked before. And for some people, it's been amazing. For some of our guys, especially those with young families who've had to work some really weird hours, it's been a kind of godsend. But that kind of presenteeism of being visibly early and visibly late will continue, and all kinds of organisations monitor how their staff work. And I'm sure RBS NatWest aren't doing anything like this at all, but there are organisations everywhere that know exactly. It's a bit like the guys that put trackers on their vans. They want to know every keystroke that's happening at any time. So I'm not sure that will change, especially. But that very difficult issue of how do you connect new employees, new team members to an organisation, especially a large organisation, is really difficult. And it puts much more pressure on an organisation to present and, well, first of all, to understand its brand and its culture, to actually know what that is, because not every organisation is really clear about what they're about. So understanding your brand and culture is a starting point, and then thinking about how you can express that within your workplace. I mean, we've all been in work environments that could be anything. They could literally be, it could be a broadcast environment, it could be an insurance office, it could be a bank, it could be a surveyor's office, whatever. And that interchangeability, I think, is a very negative aspect in terms of the design of work environments. So making spaces special will certainly help, but there is really nothing that can replace the relationships that people have with their colleagues. That's where culture is really formed. That's that's the glue that connects organizations together. The shared experiences, the shared stories, the stuff you talk about at the Christmas party that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Those are the things that really bond organizations and bond people. Of course, there are things that you can do to help that happen, but it's not just about, you can't do it with architecture alone. That's for sure. As much as I like the idea of deterministic architecture, it's got a limit.
Angela, I'm wondering if are you getting any views on this on these challenges from any occupiers?
Yeah, I think the whole question of presenteeism, they're just, until they get into a position where it's productivity, not presenteeism, that's being measured, and how you do that, because ultimately people are judged on their performance at the end of the day. So I think it comes back to this: how are we connecting the physical office environment with the virtual world, so people are operating in this virtual platform. And I quite like the idea of, I think Ross, you said the camera is always being on, so it's like an office environment, but some people are virtual and some people are actually in the office. I think the surveys and the workplace teams, what they're seeing is, what is going to make people come to the office and want to work for the company. The office is potentially a differentiator for organisations, and in order to get people to come in, they're going to have to be comfortable that the office is safe, first of all, and that is probably more important now on the back of the virus. But it's not just about hand sanitizers and touchless access and antibacterial surfaces. It's getting more into the health of the environment and the health of buildings. So just really pushing on this wellness and sustainability agenda. And our younger team members in particular are all over this and want to contribute to or have an impact on the environment in a positive way. So health of buildings and how you promote that, I think, is going to be really important. And then this whole user experience, and how can technology help that, and make an office a place that's comfortable, it's flexible, and people have spoken about this hotelization of the offices before, but I think people, if they're going in, they want to have a good experience when they go in, and that's going to help them be happy at work and not want to move to somebody who's going to pay them an extra $2,000 a year if they like where they work and who they're working with.
Across to Peter, have you got any view?
Yeah,
That'd be great, thanks.
I don't know about Ross's point about remembering Christmas parties for 5 or 10 years ago. Some people might not want to do that. But I think, as Ross said, that there is a number of parts to that question. And I think what's happened, certainly from the presenteeism point of view, the COVID experience has done a lot to dispel presenteeism. I'd love to be able to say presenteeism is now no longer an issue, but it'll always hang around for some organizations and some people. But I think what we have demonstrated to ourselves, both organizations and employees, is that we have adapted very well to working in this way. And as Angela says, the evidence of it is, are you being productive? So you'll be measured on the outcomes rather than your presence. And certainly what we've seen from our own organization, our productivity has gone up because we've been able to do so much more. So I think what organizations have seen is that they didn't think they could work from home in the first instance, and now they've demonstrated actually that they can. Not alone can they do that, but they can actually do it very well. Technology has enabled that. So the question that was asked earlier about technology is fundamentally the basis of us being able to do what we've been doing. Some people have had to learn very quickly and change their technology platforms very quickly and get up to speed. But actually what it has done is allowed us to work in this new way. So presenteeism, from what we're seeing, has dramatically dropped. But I would agree it's not completely disappeared. Hopefully one day it will. From the point of view of embracing new employees coming into an organization in a virtual world, you do have to work harder with those people to give them that additional support, help them, make them feel like they're still part of a team. You may have to do a little bit more work with them to get them to feeling like they belong, and the health and well-being of all of both the existing employees and new employees has risen dramatically in terms of how we actually support people in terms of mental health and well-being. So you do have to work harder at it. But what we can't forget is this situation is temporary. We've now seen that there's now 3 vaccines coming forward. So all going well, hopefully 2021 will be a different experience to what we've all experienced in 2020. And that over the course of 2021, we will start to get our lives back, both in our own personal lives and indeed in our work life experience. So I think the more support we can give people now, so when they do come back into the fold, albeit the environment will be different, it will be more collaborative, but at least these people will have a better view and a better understanding of what to expect because they've got that additional support. So I think you do have to work with new people more now so that when we do come back to the office in that brave new world, they'll fit in better than they did. So it is, as I said earlier, things will evolve and we just need to adapt with it. And you know what? We're very good at that.
Yeah, I might just give a NatWest view on it. This year we've been recruiting. So as we've gone through the difficult period from a bank's point of view, what we tend to see is we get an increase in fraud on debit cards and personal accounts. We see different types of cyber attack. We see anti-money laundering increase. These are typical things that in the banking sector you see when things aren't so good in the economy. When things are good, they tend to reduce. Actually, it follows the ups and downs of the economy. And we've had to onboard an awful lot of people. Traditionally in August, we bring in a lot of graduates, and I know CBRE will bring graduates in, lots of companies will bring graduates in. And our graduate intake, the kind of the week induction, the whole thing was virtual. All the training for the specialist teams in the bank had to be moved to virtual platforms almost overnight. And interesting that they always measure, after you've had your induction, you go out and you measure the experience. Our graduates this year gave the best score ever for an induction week, and the whole thing was 100% virtual. So I think there are pros and cons of it. Just, you know, getting everyone together with the travel and the environmental impact that might have. If you're a kind of UK-wide company like NatWest, sometimes it's not the best thing to be doing for lots of different reasons. And actually, will the technology enable us to do it as well if we use regional hubs, satellite offices, as well as our larger major offices? So I think there's, again, like everything, there's still a way to go on it until you find the right balance and everyone finds the right balance on it. But a very, very interesting debate. And I think the good thing is lots of people are thinking about it. Lots of people are talking about it. So it's on the agenda. An interesting question from Anne-Marie McGrath. Will the pandemic benefit the traditional smaller office building and take away from the large monolithic mega office buildings and ultimately rehabilitation of these buildings to the benefit of the environment? So any views on that, Angela, on some of the big office buildings, the big office occupiers?
Yeah, I think it comes, you know, can that be achieved, you know, in terms of achieving their brand and culture goals when they don't have a big massive campus where everybody can be on site in the one place? I'm not too sure. I think we're seeing more opportunity around maybe more London. So the big office buildings in central London, is there an opportunity for more regionalisation of offices, and perhaps a concern, you know, with the virus about having everybody in one place, is that too much of a risk? So I think if they're risk averse, then potentially yes, it's too much of a risk to have people in one place. But we've not seen any of that really filter out into the market yet. And you know, I think what we're seeing is just almost a universal flight to quality, no matter what the organisation is. Property fundamentals still being important, such as location, accessibility, a good quality office, ticking all the sustainability credentials. So yeah, still more of a general flight to quality than it being, I've not seen anything as yet, people saying, no, we're not going to have a big HQ, we're going to put it into smaller buildings. But I know our locations team are definitely working with organisations looking at you know, potential regionalisation in the future.
Maybe across to yourself, Peter, local authorities, central government, etc., as well as the private sector, do take up some large office spaces. Are you seeing a desire or any trends to go to smaller offices?
There's certainly a desire to, I'd mentioned yesterday that when you look at government policy, and the new government policy that's come out from the Scottish Government in terms of the infrastructure investment plan, which is now saying that the hierarchy is to use existing assets more efficiently, and how can we future-proof those in terms of their low carbon credentials, so that they would have longevity going forward. And that comes down to public partners coming together to collaborate in existing premises and sharing premises from other partners. So we don't see that the office will shrink. We might see some offices disappear that are less attractive to be retained because their environmental credentials just can't be improved, and that these buildings need to go. But what it does do is increase the functionality and collaboration aspects of other existing assets, whereby they become more efficient and more effective in terms of service delivery. So I think, as Angela is saying, you know, we have a journey to travel here. We're starting to see some impacts roll through where maybe less attractive existing assets need to go, and how can we improve other existing assets to be more efficient and more beneficial for collaborative working.
Great stuff. Thanks, Peter. Right, there's one last question, and I'm aware there's 4 minutes to go, and I'd quite like to finish with at least 1 minute to go to give everyone time to get to their next, whatever's next in their diary. So it's an upbeat question from Phil Reed. It's directed at Ross, but I'm going to open up to the panel to give a very short, concise, optimistic, I think, answer on this one. So is this really the most exciting time for interior space architects as developers and occupier clients are more open to creating really exciting interiors to facilitate all these well-being and operating cultural changes? A renaissance period, as someone has put it to someone. But I think across Peter's world, Angela's world, my world, and Ross's world, I think there is excitement, there is opportunity, there's massive opportunity, whether it's smart buildings, smaller spaces, spaces that have impact and actually pull you into the office rather than let you stay at home too much. So maybe Ross, do you want to just take that question and maybe exciting?
Yes, good question. Things have changed a lot over the last 20 years or so, and I think it's terrific that good design has, I suppose, become an important element in business competitiveness. You know, it's not just about delivering an office that meets the metrics and does so in the cheapest way. So that's, I think, been amazing for us, and it makes projects so much more exciting and so much richer. I mean, there's been all kinds of nonsense done in the name of making offices interesting, you know, all of that kind of Google stuff that kind of infantilizes the workplace. And I still think it's a serious business, and in a way that's what makes the challenge most spicy, I suppose, you know.
Great stuff. Angela?
Yeah, I think cost has been a barrier. So looking at the positives, now this change is being forced upon us. So real opportunity for landlords to spend money on buildings to achieve all the sustainability and tech things that we've been speaking about. And the same from the occupier side of things, you know, well certification should all be now hopefully more easy to get approval for than they maybe were in the past. So hopefully cost, notwithstanding the economic environment, maybe it's not going to be so much of a barrier.
Thank you very much. Peter?
Yes, I would totally agree. It's hugely exciting. I think organizations and employees have an amazing platform now to change the way they work in a very positive way and actually reimagine the office of the future as to how that can work even better for people and give them a new purpose for coming back to the office. And I think that to grab that opportunity now is absolutely the right time to be doing it.
Great stuff.
Joe Candy keeps us all in jobs, so that's what we want. Still a market.
There's still a market. So many thanks. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to Peter, Angela, and Ross for joining the panel with myself, Andy McBain, today. Thanks to BCO Scotland for hosting this today. I hope all of you who have managed to listen or watch the recording somehow all enjoy the debate. It's fair to say we haven't solved anything. We weren't here to solve it. We were here to just stimulate the debate, take it back into your own offices, your own companies, and your own workplace. And hopefully it helps you guys all have rich conversations over the coming days. But thanks for joining us, and I hope you all have a fantastic day for the rest of the day. Thanks very much.
That's great. Thanks, Andy.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.